What up everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we have a very hype topic. We are going to be talking about the 10 most iconic cards of the Scarlet and Violet era. Yes, there could be ones that come out after this video is released that end up being super popular, right? Giratina V from Sword and Shield was one of the ones that came out after, but it's definitely one of the most iconic cards of that era, along with the Lugia V. So we're very close though to the end of the era, and I do think we can kind of figure out which ones are the top cards, the most iconic. And these cards, if you can get it right, the most iconic ones, they end up being the cards that do really well in the long term. Now, I'm not saying that they'll make more percentage gains than any other card, like perhaps like a quote unquote not as good card could end up getting more percentage gains, but what we're looking for here is limited downside to an extent and a lot of potential upside, as people remember fondly those big cards of the era, just like we're going to talk about Sword and Shield, how that happened. Also, keep in mind that liquidity is nice to have when you're selling Pokemon cards. Yeah, it's nice that something goes for a bunch of money, but it's good that you have a big pool of people that want it. And so that's another good thing about these iconic cards of the era. You're usually always going to have an easier time finding people who want it, so more liquidity. Not just about percentage gains, but also about how easy it is to sell down the line, right? So if you like Pokemon investing, if you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, join the crew. Also, if you want to become a channel member, there are a bunch of benefits. You get to see what I'm buying and selling live. As well, I just did a member-only video talking about my full $182,917 Pokemon portfolio, and I go over my thought process on stuff there too, what kind of stuff I'd be looking to selling at what price points, and then, you know, what I'm planning to hold longer term. So I go into detail into the portfolio there. But that's it for now. Let's jump into the actual video. So first, I'm going to show you guys just how, when you pick these iconic cards of the era, how well it could go. And even though you're paying a lot, right? So I bought this Umbreon VMAX for over 800 USD. And right now there are cards, a lot of cards on this list that are going to be that much or less if you want to pick it up right now, which might seem expensive. But look at the trend though here. I bought it for 800 USD, and yet it's gone as high as 3,000. Healthy pullback here. And now it's around 2,500 in PSA 10, right? So that's the kind of gains you can expect, even if you pay expensively for these kind of iconic cards when you get it right. The same thing here with Gengar VMAX, right? I bought this for 300 something USD, went all the way up to 1450. Now healthy retracement, right? Like it always goes down a bit after you get huge spikes. That's normal. What you're looking for is at least higher lows than you had before, and you definitely have that with these cards, right? So this one is one of my biggest gains. And what did I do? I bought a card that was already popular, that was already the most expensive card of Fusion Strike, and clearly an iconic card of the era. Giratina V, the last one, I probably got paid more for this than most people, probably around 800 USD, but still did great. At one time it was doubling what I spent on it, and then right now it's settled back to around 1463. Still massive gains. And like I said, what's the downside with these iconic cards? Very limited compared to random cards that may fall out of favor, that people are just interested in now but may not be interested in later. So now we're going to go into the Scarlet Violet era, showing you guys how just buying the top cards and the most iconic cards among it and putting some thought into it, you could limit your downside, right? While also helping increase your chance of getting insane returns. Like with the Gengar, we're talking like 4x returns so far, right? The Sword and Shield is not even that old now, so you might even get crazy returns as we go on. Now, this might be the most controversial one on the list, but I still think it's worth being here because of how much it just, you know, upset the whole Pokemon investing community, how everybody, you know, covered it, every YouTuber put in their thumbnail. you have Drowzee. So here we have the full year, right? It was going up slow and steady. So there was some good natural demand here. Then it just went absolutely crazy. And then a bunch of people bought when it was super expensive. Kind of the opposite of a buyout, I guess you could say. And then now it's retracing a bit. But as you can see, the retracement way higher than it used to be. And I could see this card continuing to do well long term. If we look at the PSA 10 price, we get a similar story, right? Going up, jumping up, and then some healthy retracement here. So this has gone down, like at its highest, it even had sales over 1,000 USD. And here we have, I've even seen some sales around 600 USD mark recently. So if you wanted to really add this to your collection or your investment portfolio in PSA 10, now might not be a bad time because, again, you're doing much better than those people that bought it at 1,000 USD. Just to go, and we're going to go over PSA population because I do think that's important to consider for all of these iconic cards. So 430 PSA 10s out of 2,178 submitted. So that is actually a 19.74% chance of getting a PSA 10. We like those low percentage chances of getting a PSA 10 here on the channel because it means that the PSA population is more protected, and thus it's less likely for all of a sudden like 1,000 to be added overnight, which obviously if you have more supply, then the same amount of demand will lower the price. So in this case, when you see this like 20% or lower, that's really good low chance of getting a PSA 10, which is what we want to see with these cards. So yeah, the Drowzee, again, might be the most controversial just because it isn't a traditionally popular Pokemon on this list. But the fact that it's the most expensive PSA 10 of Scarlet and Violet base set, the fact that it had such a story where the whole community went crazy about it, I think people are going to remember those moments, those emotions. And the fact that it's that amazing Kamiya artwork, in my opinion, the best Kamiya artwork, it's hard to get a PSA 10. I do think this will be one of the ones with, if you buy it at this point for around 600 USD, I think it'll have a limited downside long term. And I think that it has potential to do really well. Especially because, let me know if I'm wrong, but I saw that a bunch of stuff is getting a reprint, right? Everyone's talking about it. Paldea Evolved. Some people even say Obsidian Flames. We got Twilight Masquerade, Paldean Fates, Surging Sparks. So, but I didn't hear anybody mention Scarlet and Violet base set. So correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But if Scarlet and Violet base set isn't going to get reprinted, it's really good for those difficult to grade cards in PSA 10 and Scarlet and Violet base. So I'm looking at the Drowzee, I'm looking at the Routes, like those kinds of cards are looking very pretty if they're not going to get reprints like all of the other ones. So then we got, of course, Magikarp, not controversial at all at this point. This is the king of illustration rares. Yeah, like very healthy chart look like it went up, yeah, went down a bit. Like I said, normal, you never expect something to go straight up. And then boom, 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 it's kept going up ever since. Now this may be slowed down a bit by the Paldea Evolved reprints, but long term, this is going to be one of the most iconic cards of the era for sure. Shinji Kanda artwork. There's a reason this is my profile picture on the channel. Really believe in this card long term, and also hard to grade, as we're about to see. PSA 10, you can see a similar story. Right now, it's kind of been leveling off around that 1,500 mark. And again, I do think that it'll go up, blow past it eventually, but it's healthy that that's the floor it's found for now. We'll see how the reprints affect it, but still, looking strong. The graphs are looking strong for Magikarp right now. And you have 2,100 almost out of 10,490 sent in, which if you look at the chase cards of Sword and Shield, like Umbreon VMAX had 15,000, more than 15,000 PSA 10s by now. So 2,100 is not a lot in the grand scheme of things at all. And it's about 20% chance of getting that PSA 10. So Drowzee is actually a bit more difficult to grade than the Magikarp. Then we have the Sunzard, right? It's always nice when these cards are big enough to have their nicknames. That's always also a good sign that a card is popular and is going to end up being iconic when people and the community cares enough to give it a nickname. So this is the big chase card. Obviously, Charizard. This is a reinvention, if you will, of Pokemon base set. And of course, in that one, Charizard was the big chase card. And here again, not surprising, the Charizard Special Illustration Rare is the big chase card of 151. One of the most popular sets of all time. People are going to have a lot of nostalgia towards it. It's like a second chance of getting all those base set cards that you never got a chance to get when you were too young. And so I do think that this is going to be the best of arguably one of, if not the best sets that came out in Scarlet and Violet era. This is the best card of it, the king of it, if you will. And because of that, I do think that this is easily going to end up being one of the most iconic cards of the era. Let's check in on the PSA 10. PSA 10, you can see it's been doing great, despite the fact that they're printing this a bunch. Under no circumstance should you think that they're not printing 151. They're printing it a bunch, and yet, despite that, the demand is so high that this Charizard's holding insane value. Yes, I have seen sales even over 1,000, but still, holding value around 900 USD is really impressive, especially because we know they've been trying to pretty much print this to the ground. And we'll see that when we get to the population. So 13,236 out there, almost like the Umbreon VMAX approaching those numbers, and 39,247 sent in. That's huge numbers sent in for grading. So that's a 33.72% chance of getting a PSA 10. Next, we have the Greninja. This card I absolutely love. It kind of re-sparked the big chase card feel in the Scarlet and Violet era, because before this, there wasn't those crazy expensive chase cards. Even the Charizard and the Magikarp, now they're pretty expensive. They weren't that expensive when they initially dropped. So this Greninja really started the whole big price tag for a chase card in Scarlet and Violet era that we were used to in Sword and Shield. Now here this is one of the best graphs I've ever seen, honestly. Like, a lot of people underestimate Twilight Masquerade, and usually my strategy is to wait at least 6 months after a set comes out because of the hype to buy singles, or even PSA 10, because you want the hype to die down and to get it at that cheaper price point. But some cards can buck the trend, and this Greninja is one of those that if you got it right away, you actually would have been way better off than waiting 6 months to get it. Now, I still like sometimes it's honestly 3 months if I feel like, it all depends on the situation. Like for the Surging Sparks Pikachu, I waited 3 months because it felt like a good time to get it. But yeah, this card bucked the trend big time. And for that, it is a legend. It is going to be iconic. And there's no sign of slowing down at this point. It's absolutely crazy. Greninja is obviously a fan favorite Pokemon, but no one expected it to do this good. And as like one of the big underdogs of the era, as one of the big dark horses of the era, I think it will be remembered very fondly. Now, PSA 10 prices are a bit of a different story. Like, yes, it's been going up, it's been going strong, but it's easier to grade than some of the earlier sets we've seen. And because of that, so you have 4,832 out of 9,092 sent in. So because of that, 53% chance of getting a PSA 10 if you send it in. So that is limiting for now the upside of the PSA 10 compared to something like the Magikarp, because it almost feels like if you get a Greninja in raw, you're over half likely to get a PSA 10. Now, it's not really like that, because people that send it in for grading in the first place to PSA already have a feeling that they have a good card, right? It's a cream of the crop of the cards. Then they feel like they have a chance of getting a PSA 10. So it's not like every raw Greninja has a 50% chance of getting a PSA 10. But the ones people feel strongly about, feel good about, that they send in to PSA, because it's not free to send it in to get graded, those tend to be good enough to get PSA 10 over half the time, which is good for the raw single price probably to an extent, because people will think, okay, if I buy the raw, I could probably flip it for a PSA 10, but it does hold down the PSA 10 price, unfortunately. for now. But I do think as time goes on, like it's still a lot lower than a lot of the Sword and Shield gem rates or chances of getting PSA 10. So for that reason, I still think that Greninja is going to do really well long term, just like it's been doing, right? So Pikachu with Gray Felt Hat. This is another one of those where, if you held off, you're kicking yourself. I did hold off for a while, but if you guys follow the channel, I did get this a little bit ago. So you have an absolutely stellar chart where you just, they were printing. They said they'd print more. They'd give out more. They were giving them out. And then all of a sudden, when that dried up, bam, you see how popular it is. No surprise there. Crazy story around it with like the mania that was going around this card. You got Pikachu, the most popular mascot of the entire franchise. And then you got a Van Gogh style artwork and those artistic, just like the Scream Pokemon versions, like those artistic Pokemon cards tend to do really good. So this promo, I believe, is going to do really well in the long run. Now, in this case, you have the PSA 10 coming down a bit at this point. So it might not be a bad time to pick one up if you want to add it to your collection. Like I said, all these cards I think have relatively limited downside at this point, and I think that they have a lot of upside long term. Now here is the interesting thing about this. So more than double the Umbreon VMAX. You have 35,139 of these out there out of almost 70,000 sent in. So you're looking at roughly a 50% chance of getting a PSA 10. So honestly, not that easy compared to some other cards, like I said, from Sword and Shield. Like you have way higher chance of getting PSA 10 with some of those cards. So honestly, it's nice to see that it's at least 50% and not like 90%, right? But it is a big population. I don't think that'll matter though, because it's such a popular card, such a popular story behind it, such a popular Pokemon, Van Gogh. Like there's so much going for this card. And as time goes on, it'll be harder and harder to get that PSA 10, like a new PSA 10. So I'm not saying that there will never be people selling them. I just think that as time goes on, the PSA 10 will have more and more of a premium compared to the raw card. Then we have the Bubble Mew. Again, one of those with a nickname, right? That's always a good sign. And by the way, if you guys didn't know, Umbreon VMAX was not the chase card of Evolving Skies initially. It was the Rayquaza. And after the Rayquaza kind of was the chase card for a bit, Umbreon surpassed it and then became the card of the era, right? Not just iconic, the card of the era. Well, the Bubble Mew had a similar situation where obviously the shiny Charizard was the number one card, and then Mew surprised everyone and overtook it. I actually bought this in PSA 10 before it surpassed the Charizard, so that was very glad I did that. And then people always make jokes because it's like the Bubble Mew, when will the bubble pop? But the bubble is looking good. Like I said, healthy retracement here. There's nothing wrong with this, right? We will get reprints, but I think this is, again, one of those cards. Fan favorite Pokemon, fan favorite artwork, a shiny variant of it. I think that cannot be overlooked or understated overstated, I should say, how important that is. Because this may be the only shiny illustration rare that we get ever of Mew, which is a big deal, right? You have a lot of 151 Pokemon here, another cool aspect to it. So I do think that this is one of those iconic cards of the era that's going to do really well long term. Let's take a look at the PSA 10. So PSA 10, not at its all-time highs, but didn't retrace crazy, right? So from 1,042 to around 900 at this point. And we got 8,425 in PSA 10 out of 19,147 sent in, which is a 44% chance of getting a PSA 10. So less than the Van Gogh Pikachu and less than the Greninja. Now, Pikachu, Surging Sparks. Here, this one took what Greninja did and even went harder with it. Not in the sense of being underestimated at first and growing a lot, but in the sense of being that super expensive chase card. So it started right off the bat at almost 500 USD. Now it has retraced a bit, which is normal because of the hype around it and everything. But long term, it is a Pikachu. It is the chase card of an absolutely amazing set that a lot of people love, Surging Sparks. A lot of people think it's the best main set release so far. And because of that, yeah, I can't see this not doing well long term. To boot, to make it even better and juicier, the PSA 10 price, it is also now starting to go back up from the looks of it. So I did pick this up last month. And like I said, I tried to wait 6 months, but I felt like there was so much interesting stuff coming out. And the focus was on the Umbreon. Pikachu was no longer the center of attention. It just felt like the right time to pick up a Pikachu in PSA 10. I actually got it for less. I believe I got it for less than 1,000 USD. But you guys, if you watch the videos when I purchased it, I said the exact price I paid for it. But I believe it was around, either way, it was probably around 1,000 USD. But now it seems to be going back up. Latest sales even 1,200. So it looks like I timed the bottom pretty well. We'll see what happens. But long term, I do think that this will be more expensive than it is now, and a low chance of getting PSA 10 is going to help it out as well. So 3,292 out of 8,640 sent in got a PSA 10, so only 38% chance of getting PSA 10. That is lower than the Giratina V, which obviously has a big price tag at this point, and it's Pikachu. So whether you love the artwork or not, I think it has enough going for it that I couldn't miss out. I couldn't take the chance of not having it in my investment portfolio. Then we have Charmander, Pokemon Center exclusive version. So obviously this one is more interesting in the PSA 10 because of the really hard gem rate, because it's very small chance of getting that PSA 10. But we'll talk about the raw for a bit. As you can see, the raw has been growing steadily for a long time. In 1 year, it went all the way from less than $20 to now $161. So that's 8x in 1 year for the raw. Now here we go. The PSA 10 is absolutely crazy. Yeah, you have here 1570 USD, but latest sales you have up to 2000, 1870, 1700. So you could tell this is going to be going up from here next month. Go into chart updates. You have 444 out of 3,382 sent in. So that's a 13% chance of getting that PSA 10. And keep in mind, guys, this card is the king. Just like Magikarp is the king of illustration rares, this card is the king of Pokemon Center Elite Trainer Box promos in PSA 10. By far, it has been consistently on top. It's a fan favorite Pokemon. I'm sure you'll find odd sales here and there. I think there was a sale, which to me is fishy, but for the, what's it called again? I don't even know the name. See how unpopular the Pokemon is? It's what is it? Fluttermane, yeah. So I think there was a sale of the Fluttermane in PSA 10 because there's such a small amount, and it's 20% chance of getting PSA 10, so that it could be easily bought out. And then there was a sale for 2,000 USD. To me, that is very fishy. So it could be someone bought out a bunch of the PSA 10 population, had a fake sale, right? Had a friend buy it out or something, and then now they want to raise the price so they could sell those at a profit. Right, that's what I would guess. I don't think Fluttermane will ever be actual competition for Charmander. We talked about liquidity. I don't think Fluttermane will be very liquid. But this Charmander is absolutely going to be as liquid as you can get with super high price points, right? Fan favorite Pokemon, the undisputed king of that Pokemon Center Elite Trainer Box era in PSA 10. And only 444 out there. The cool thing about this is those Pokemon Center Elite Trainer boxes are rare to begin with. Then you combine a very low chance of getting PSA 10 with the Charmander, and you have a recipe for a very low population, relatively speaking, for a long time to come, which is what people look for as a collectible, right? So for that reason, I think the rarity, the popularity, the track record already is going to spell really good things long term for this Charmander. And of course, we got, which kind of, I don't know. I'm not in love with this Umbreon, and I know people constantly have issues with it being called a Umbreon, but it's what we're gonna call it because that's what the majority of people call it. But again, I'm not crazy about this card just because I don't want it to go from like one Umbreon chase card in one era to the next Umbreon chase card the next era. I don't want this to be the number one card at the end of the day. But we'll see what happens. Right now, it is obviously the king. The raw is 1,587 USD. As you can see, it's a bit choppy, but holding good value, relatively speaking. Again, they did say specifically they're going to try to print a lot of this set, Prismatic Evolutions. So we'll see how that affects the price. And then the PSA 10, obviously, people were getting crazy about it, 8,415. And now it's settling around that 3,000 USD mark. That's the latest sales I've seen too, around 3,000 USD. So we'll see what happens here. I do think it's going to be one of the most iconic cards of the era. I do think it's going to be one of the most expensive. I just personally think it might not be at the top like it is right now. And this is one of the ones that I'm not buying yet because, again, I don't want to be caught in this situation where I'm paying 8,000 and then it goes down to 3,000 a month later. I'm going to wait that 3 to 6 month point and see what the price point is there. I don't think it'll be a Greninja situation where, you know, it just keeps going up and up because there's a lot of cool things coming and they're going to be printing more of it, more going to be added to the population. It's also not ridiculously hard to get a PSA 10. So we got 600 out of 1,496 sent in. So that's a 40% chance of getting PSA 10. Again, easier to get a PSA 10 than a lot of the cards we looked at in this list. So something to keep in mind. And this might be cheating, but yeah, you could grill me if I'm wrong. But I do think the 10th and final iconic card of the era is going to be the Mewtwo. Rocket's Mewtwo is, in my opinion, going to be one of the most iconic cards of the era, if not the most iconic card. Yes, it's not out. You know, some people have problems with the fact that I have high hopes for it and we haven't even seen the artwork. But knowing Mewtwo, knowing that Rocket hype, knowing how Destined Rivals is going to combine Heatwave Arena with the Rocket set, and Heatwave Arena is looking amazing, absolutely, with the Garchomp art, with the Typhlosion art, with the Ho-Oh art, and then Mewtwo reigning supreme on top of that insane set. I could definitely see it being the best modern set, the best set of the era, at least the main set, but probably the best set of the era. I can definitely see that happening. And Mewtwo reigning supreme above it. Yeah, that's definitely one to watch out for. Again, I wouldn't necessarily pay the prices right off the bat. Like with the with the Umbreon, I'm probably gonna be waiting to see what price points we get after the hype dies down, after the release. So probably gonna be waiting that 6 month period. I'll keep you guys updated on the channel, but yeah, I can't see Mewtwo not being at least one of the most iconic cards of the era, if not the most iconic. And yeah, again, price point does matter. Pick cards that, you know, try to get the best price possible. But in my opinion, these, if you get them at decent price points, not rushing in, not FOMOing in when it just comes out because of the hype. If you wait, try to get it at a dip, try to get it at lower price points. Yeah, you can't time it perfectly, but I think out of all the cards you're going to, you know, you can buy, I think these are the ones that have limited downside to an extent and potentially a lot of upside as people start to remember Scarlet and Violet fondly as it becomes older, as generations pass. I think these are the cards that will stand the test of time, and I look forward to finding out if I'm how right or wrong I am. You guys, if you're watching a year from now, you can let me know. But let me know right now in the comments, did I miss any? What cards do you think are going to be iconic from this era? If I missed any, which ones do you agree with the most? You can let me know if you disagree with some of them. Like, I think a lot of people will think that Drowzee is just a hype card of the month and won't stand the test of time. I do disagree, but we'll see what happens. I do like the price point at this point in time. If you like these kinds of videos, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe. Remember, you can check out my full portfolio and my rationale behind it. If you become a member, you'll also have buy alerts, sell alerts, see what I'm doing when. We have member-only live streams and everything. But that is it for this one, and I'll see you in the next video.